Today's show and the following message are brought to you by a former guest, Bob Hoban, founder of Hoban Law Group, which is the first exclusive cannabis law firm. They have offices throughout the U.S. and the world. Listen to MJ Bulls Episode 7 or go to Hoban Law for all your cannabis legal needs.
Once we're in a business, our specialty then becomes consolidation, looking at the public markets, replacing debt, bringing in bigger equity. That's really where we serve our companies the best and the place with which companies should think of Arcadian as a potential investor.
From Bumming It Media, it's the MJ Bulls Podcast, a show about raising cannabis capital. I'm Dan Humiston, and on today's show, the Cannabis Investor Spotlight shines on Matthew Norgren, the founder of Arcadian, a cannabis growth fund. Today on the Cannabis Investor Spotlight series, we're joined by Matthew Norgren, the founder and managing director at Arcadian. Matt, thanks for being on the MJ Bulls Podcast.
Dan, thanks for having us. Really excited to talk with you this morning and thankful for vehicles like yours that allow people to hear what's happening in this industry. I think it's one of the most important things we can do is talk about what's happening, educate on fun things that are going on.
Well, I'll tell you, before we jump into it, I got to tell our listeners this story because last night, like always, I start preparing for your interview, and like always, I put your name into Google, and the search results came up, and they're not like always. I mean, first off, I see that you were the quarterback at Texas, which is, that's big time football. And I'm like, whoa, that is so cool. And then I read on and it's like, you're on the national champion team that beat USC, which is one of the greatest games ever. And then I look, you have 2 degrees in less than 4 years, which is unheard of. You went on to play in the NFL. You got 2 more master's degrees. And then you come back to Dallas and this is crazy. It just keeps getting better. You star on a reality show, Bravo's Most Eligible Dallas. Keep in mind, I found all of this out on the first page of Google. You got to be the only person in cannabis now whose life is more boring.
Well, I'm not as young as I once was, so I've had a few years to accumulate some news. The good news about this industry in particular is that so many walks of life have entered it in so many ways. To hear that I may be one of the less boring is quite fun, but all of those experiences accumulated for me to be in this position to do what we're doing at this level.
Yeah, and all kidding aside, for our listeners, they need to know that you're a really accomplished investor. I mean, you've managed over $7 billion in transactions, and your company, Arcadian, is one of the most well-known in cannabis investment funds. Now, Arcadian's investment approach is kind of unique in that you only invest in non-plant touching cannabis ancillary business. Why'd you go that route?
Good question. I think it's important when people ask themselves why Arcadian and additionally why non-touch ancillary investments. The real reason was because the institutional private equity investor base that I dealt with in my career simply did not have the risk appetite for investing in asset class that did not have federal approval. Even in today's world, institutional investors still cannot invest in those businesses. We foresee that being the case for the next several quarters ahead. So sitting here today, it's actually turning out to be probably economically today the best way to invest as well.
You have a lot of really well-known companies that you've invested in that are in your portfolio. And a lot of that has to do with your philosophy on investing and at the stage at which you invest in companies.
Yeah, we've been able to bring in some pretty big names. And I think the reason for that is because our investment strategy is to invest in growth rounds for companies that service the industry. And by default, that means companies that are relatively mature. You see some of the bigger names because we typically don't invest early with a seed or angel-like mentality. We really are mid-stage, early-stage growth investors.
If a cannabis company right now is out there listening to this and want to work with you, what do you need from them?
I think it's really important for any company to take into consideration various types of investor appetite that are out there. We do value understanding a business early. Looking under the hood for a later opportunity only benefits us. At the same time, we have mandates within our partnership agreements that we are looking for growth opportunities, which means they've got to have a year or two of traction, revenue, market share. They have to be at for us to be able to invest. Our expertise is more along the lines of when a company has solved a lot of that and truly is in a position to take in capital for uses such as hiring new salespeople, moving to a new market, making an acquisition that's either a synergistic business or a bolt-on for strategic reasons. That's where we start to be helpful.
Okay.
And then once we're in a business, our specialty then becomes consolidation, looking at the public markets, replacing debt, bringing in bigger equity. That's really where we serve our companies the best and the place with which companies should think of Arcadian as a potential investor.
Just a quick shout out to one of our former guests, Cannabis Pharmaceuticals, which is a publicly traded cannabis biotechnology company trading under the symbol CNBX. Listen to MJ Bulls episode 18 to learn about the developments in their cannabinoid-based cancer treatment therapy. And now back to the show. Let's talk about the investor. I mean, you guys raise money too, because that's what you use to deploy with these companies. How does someone invest with Arcadian, and why does it make sense to let you guys manage their cannabis investment rather than them try to do it on their own?
Yep, couple main points on that. Number one, this is an industry that is largely unregulated. And what that means is there aren't the normal data points and resources available for investors to make decisions on companies. And because of that, it's really important to have somebody who has spent a lot of time in this industry, is at all the proper gatherings, and has all the right relationships in order to determine what companies are going to do what, when, where, how, and why. The next point is there was a time a year or two ago that companies just really needed capital. Although they would prefer strategic investors, capital was capital. They just needed it, and there wasn't a ton out there. Now we're in a world where the best deals are not struggling for capital. The best companies are saving allocations for us, want us in their deals. I think those are some of the reasons why it's really, really important to invest with a professional in this space. And I'm not just making the case for Arcadian. I think we're one of the best out there, and I think a lot of people would agree. But the case really is being made that without the certainty of information, with the best deals not needing capital and having to make decisions on who they take capital from. And by the way, it's very difficult for them to take some private rich person or famous person's capital when there's 10 funds that they need to have in that deal because we have portfolios that they need to leverage. So 9 times out of 10, they do take our capital. So I think that's really important. And then ultimately, probably maybe even the biggest part of that equation is the fact that there's still a lot of work to do. And you need a group in there making sure that these companies continue to make the right decisions, help the partners make sure that we get in and out of these deals like we should. And so for the next several years, it's not just the investment and sit back and wait and see. You need a professional team in there making sure it does what it's supposed to do.
We've been speaking with Matthew Norgren from the Arcadian Group, and all of the information will be on the MJ Bulls website. And if you're interested in finding more, we'll have everything on the website. Matt, thanks for taking time out of your super interesting life to be on our show.
We appreciate it. And to everyone who's listening, I'll encourage you to continue to listen to Dan, the MJ Bulls podcast. It's so important that the public understands the tremendous amount of benefits this industry is going to do for the world. The economic return is evident, but listening to these podcasts is what is going to make this better for everybody.
Thanks for everything you do, Matt. Good luck. Just a quick shout out to one of our former guests, VividGrow, a cannabis lighting and technology company which is expanding its brand through organic growth and strategic acquisitions. Listen to MJ Bulls episode 15 or go to vividgrow.com to learn more. Thanks for listening to the MJ Bulls podcast. To learn more about today's guest or to become a guest, visit our website at MJBulls.com. Today's show was produced by Bumminit Media, with original music composed by Jamie Humiston. I'm Dan Humiston, and you've been listening to the MJ Bulls podcast.